Hello, and welcome to a breakdown of the Fall 2024 Course Assessment Form. Now, if you are new to Mount West, you may have not seen how we've previously been working with assessment, especially at the course level. If you are, existing faculty, you've been here for a while though, you will note that this really isn't going to be too different from what you've seen before. However, in the interest of making sure that we are all on the same page, this video, which will be very short, will just walk you through each individual portion of the course assessment form, just to make sure that you know what to expect. Now, this first section here is fairly standard. This is going to be the part where you include either your name, if you are a department of one, or if you are in a department in which you have several people teaching the same course. They've got multiple sections of that course. So for example, I'm an English instructor. I teach English 101. There are 4 other people who are also teaching English 101, right? At least. And in thinking about that, whoever is writing this departmental assessment form, whoever is writing the report for all courses of English 101, will have to list everybody in this section, because ultimately that is a team effort and everybody is sending their data to that one person. But if your course is only offering that one section or maybe 2 sections and you're the only one teaching them, you are the only one who has to have their name provided here. Directly under that, you're going to have the course name, number, and section. So again, kind of going with that English example, if we've got multiple sections, we have written communication, English 101, sections 101, 102, etc. And you would list any of those sections that are assessed in this specific report, if they exist, because again, you could be assessing a course that only has one section and that's it, and you're the only one who teaches it. But just in case we're working with a team, that is how we'd handle it. And then finally, in this first section, to which division do you belong? Liberal arts and transfer studies, career and technical, workforce, or allied health? You'll want to list the division to which you belong. Now, these are all required, as we can see with the red asterisk next to it, so I'm going to go ahead and type in some gibberish just to make sure that we are able to get through these sections. Otherwise, we cannot progress. Our next section is about our course learning outcomes. So we are going to state the outcomes that were assessed in this course. The learning outcomes should be clear, measurable, and student-friendly. Now, you're going to list those outcomes here, and you should list at least 2 that are being assessed. Previously, we were only assessing 1 outcome per semester. We have moved away from that. If you are thinking, I don't have an assignment that assesses all of my outcomes, that's fine. No worries. It needs to assess at least 2. So which 2 or more outcomes are being assessed this round in this course? And then which general education outcome or outcomes are embedded in this course? Now there is a note, this is coming directly from the General Education Committee. Not all course learning outcomes need to be aligned with a general education outcome, right? Not all of them. However, if you have a class in which you've got those general education outcome or outcomes embedded, and that should be the case, right? You've got those in there, you will want to list them. So for me, for instance, as an English instructor, I've got written communication and I have critical thinking. So I would want to make sure to list those. So which general education outcome or outcomes are embedded in your course, and you're going to list those here. And of course, I'm going to go ahead and type in my nonsense so that we can continue. After this, we're going to get to our outcome measure. Your outcome measure is the assignment that you are using to assess student success. The word assignment, however, is not specific enough, and nouns like discussion or group activity are too vague to adequately assess. So you do really want to describe what this assignment is. When did it happen in the semester? What instruction did they have beforehand? If you want to provide information directly from the assignment sheet, that would also be great, but know that words like essay are really not that specific. What kind of essay? Group activity? What kind of group activity? What specifically are they doing? And keep in mind too, if we're looking at things that are accessible, if it's just a conversation, that's a little bit harder to do unless you're doing like an interview type deal. So what kind of assignment are you utilizing to assess this information? Describe the assignment or measure you use to assess those learning outcomes. Include enough information within the narrative to ensure its context is clear, complete, and appropriate. Appropriate being the rigor standards that we have on this campus. So we're going to go ahead and add in our nonsense. And then from here, this is where things start to get a little bit more specific. So you've identified who you are, your course learning outcomes, your general education outcomes, all of that fun stuff, right? Now we're going to get into what actually happened with that measure, with that assignment. Your first question is going to be, did you use a rubric to assess this measure? If you are using an exam to assess these students, it's entirely likely that you did not use a rubric. Now, previous messaging, right, from a couple semesters ago had been, we are going to have rubrics be required. And that had been something that we as the assessment committee had intended to kind of carry the mantle for in this semester. But in thinking about all of the different assignments that are offered on campus, especially the ones that are exam-based, you're not going to have a standard rubric as your assessment metric for every kind of assignment. So instead, we've got this question that asks, did you use a rubric, for which you can answer yes or no. Let's say that no, you did not use a rubric. And hopefully, if it's not an exam, you did have one. But let's just say hypothetically, you did not. Next, you're going to describe the benchmark for student success with regard to your measure, to your assignment. So let's say you don't have a rubric, but you are working with an exam. What to you in this course? What constitutes success? An example might be, quote, 80% of students will receive at least a 75% on the exam. That way, you've got a benchmark. What defines success in this case? We do want to make sure that stuff like this is as concrete and specific as we can be. Otherwise, to what are we measuring these students against? What specific measure or benchmark rather are they meant to meet? If we don't have one, how are we determining success? Or is it ultimately kind of arbitrary? So now we're going to have this question in here, and that really helps too if you're not working with a rubric. But even if you are working with a rubric, let's say you've got 4 levels of proficiency. Do they need to at least hit the level 3 to be considered successful? I would say probably, right? But you need to have some kind of benchmark for this success. If you utilized a rubric, we do have an option to go ahead and attach that, so you'll want to include that here. But as you'll note, the red asterisk is not here. This one's not required because not everyone will have it. And then here's where we start to break things down. What were the results of this measure? And we're going to talk about these results as we move through this report. The first of which is going to be, for example, what was the percentage of students that received an A, B, C, D, or F? How many students met the student success benchmark? We talked about this during the writing assessment reports workshop, which is available. A recorded version is up on the CETL's YouTube channel. And we talked about how students' letter grades aren't the be-all, end-all when it comes to assessment data, but it is a good step in the right direction. For instance, if you've got a list of students that received A, B, C's, D's, what have you, and 40% of students got a C, okay, that's a good start, right? What specifically caused that? Go to your rubric. Go to the exam. Are they having issues with questions 6 and 15? In the area of the rubric, are they really struggling with incorporating supporting evidence or citations or whatever those sections are on your rubric? We use the letter grades to help establish a foundation, and then once we have those percentages, we can really dig into them and find out what was going on. So here is where we do that, right? What do these results indicate about your students' performance if you do have that 40% that received a C, or maybe even lower on this assignment? What happened? What does that indicate? What problem areas can we glean from the rubric, the exam, etc.? So we're really working to break down this information. So let's go ahead and add our nonsense in here so that we can progress to our next section. So we've expounded upon this. We've talked about not just the letter grades, but also what they mean in this specific context. And that brings us to our final section, which is the improvement or maintenance plan. An improvement plan would be, let's say that, again, going back to that example, 40% of these students got a C. We need to improve on something. Something needs to change. However, let's say hypothetically, like 85% or so of your students got an A or a B. That's pretty solid. Granted, it's not everybody, but the likelihood that you're going to get everybody all the time, not super high. We can, however, even though we're not looking to maybe necessarily strictly improve, we can maintain. Maybe this semester was awesome. What do you need to do to make sure that you are able to maintain that success, to continue that trend of student success in this course? So, Number 12 here, describe the way or ways in which your students did or did not meet the success benchmark previously identified. For example, based on your previous answer, would you consider this assessment loop to be closed? What percentage of students met this expectation or success benchmark? This is where we identify whether or not we are needing an improvement plan or a maintenance plan. If we look at our benchmark and we say, yeah, a good chunk, if I wanted that 80% of students to have a 75 on this exam, they did it. Awesome. Excellent. We've met that. If not, this is where we identify, here are the issues, this thing is not closed in terms of our assessment loop, and we need to go back and do something about this to make this better. What is your improvement plan or your maintenance plan? So you've identified your issues, you've identified whether or not the loop is closed or still open in terms of student success. What now? Keeping in mind, instruction can always be improved. Be sure to consider the context in which this measure is occurring. A maintenance plan in this context is your plan to maintain this level of student success if the sample size met the success benchmark. So again, ultimately, it depends on your results. If the students are killing it and you're killing it, how do you continue to keep doing that thing? If maybe, and this is a lot more common, right? If there was something that we tried and it was new and it didn't go over as well as we wanted it to, that's perfectly normal. We've all been there. However, how do we intend to improve that thing going forward? And to echo something that the assessment committee talked about in their workshops, when we're writing improvement plans, we want to make sure that our improvement plans are very concrete and specific, as well as directly linked to our evidence. If the rubric says, yeah, these students are not doing so hot with regard to thesis statements, your improvement plan should speak to thesis statements. If the exam says that students were not doing very well on question number 8, and question number 8 pertained to, I don't know, the critical period in memory and trauma and stuff, that's outside of my discipline. But if it pertained to that specific area, how do you intend to address that? What activities do you need to add? How do you intend to beef up your lecture? What resources do you need to include? What specifically, based on that data and that evidence, do you need to do? And then finally, our last 2 questions. In which semester will these changes be implemented? And when will you reassess these outcomes? So let's say that I am, again, teaching English 101. I teach it all the time, year-round, meaning that if I noticed something now in fall of 2024, I am implementing changes next semester, in spring of 2025. However, English, like all other courses, right, we assess them every year, so I'm not going to reassess this outcome, or these outcomes, rather, until fall of 2025. I'll come back to assessing it in a year, but I am implementing it next semester because I want to make sure that I'm able to make those changes and up that student success as best I can. And once all of these questions are answered, you will hit submit. So this has been a very brief tour of the fall 2024 course assessment form. Again, we do go over it more in depth in that assessment committee workshop that was recorded and placed on the CEDLS YouTube channel in the same spot where you found this video. This video is also in the CEDLS assessment resources playlist, and that video, that recorded workshop, is also in that playlist. So you can hop over there and get additional information about writing those reports, best practices, recommendations, all of that fun stuff. But this video was really just to give you a quick tour. Now, if you've got questions, comments, concerns about assessment, by all means, reach out to members of the assessment committee. You can talk to your chair, talk to your dean, you can talk to the director of the CEDL. There are lots of folks here who would be happy to help you out with regard to assessment. So thank you so much for watching this video, and I hope you have an awesome rest of your day.